Hey y'all, Coach K here. All right, so as our growth game planners work through their monthly planning, I'm always talking about the importance of data, tracking it, entering it, reviewing it. If you're in this community, you know I'm a broken record about how much your monthly check-ins matter, your monthly data check-ins matter. And I know that a lot of you hear me and nod along and genuinely get it, but sometimes you're not sure on how to really dig into your data in a way that feels useful. And so I wanted to do a mini lesson where I focus on the most important part of the data work, in my opinion. And this is the part that will help you get better at digging in, and that's data conversations. And so, what I've noticed is that data labs and data work can feel like watching paint dry for a lot of you, and I get excited about it. And I think that's because I know that it's not just about numbers. The numbers are just a support, but it's more about the conversation. And so if you're having whack, boring conversations when you look at data, it's going to make data meetings and data discussions feel dry and not useful. But what actually creates the momentum is when you slow down, you dig deeper, and you really talk through the data. That's where insights surface. And when insights surface, and you continue to meet monthly and find out new things about your customer, your company, the data, the strategies over time, because it's not a thing that just happens in one data meeting. Over time, those insights really from week to week, from month to month, lead to smart and strategic moves and changes that you can actually get excited about, and that you get excited about testing. And so I want to move beyond just telling you to have better data discussions, which is, something we're talking about all the time. And I want to get very clear and very practical with you in this mini lesson. And so I'm going to walk you through exactly what to do, and how to have deeper conversations when you're in WinLab, when you're in a meeting with your bestie, or even when you're working with your team or alone. What are the sorts of data questions you should be asking? I'm going to walk you through a couple of them. And what are the types of answers that really show that you have real clarity and strategic leadership and you're going deep in your discussions around the data. And those are the types of responses I'm going to go over with you, like what they look like. I'm also going to talk about the answers that I hear all the time, the responses and the conversations that I hear all the time, which tend to be surface or venting or off track, none of which actually move the needle in your business. All right, let's jump in, because at the end of this mini lesson, I want you to feel equipped to better have conversations and lead with better decisions that are data driven. All right, so just a heads up, the questions that I'm going to walk you through and the responses to them, or the, ideal types of responses to them, are specifically about win data. And win data is the data that's associated with your traffic, lead, and sales strategies in our growth game plan system. So the focus around this data meeting is going to be an example of a win, data meeting. I'm only going to walk you through a couple questions to demonstrate the difference between surface level conversations and rich, meaningful conversations. All right, so question one, when you're in a data meeting, you're talking about traffic and leads and conversions. The first question you're going to ask is, how many leads came in this month and how many converted? More than likely, this is the best place, one of the best places to start, because you want to see what the data actually is. You can't have real conversations about data without the data. So this is you really sharing the data. Now, when you ask this question, here's what you should be listening for. Um, an example statement might be, we had 18 leads and 3 conversations. Um, this is ideal because it tells me that you have an actual count and not a guess, and you have an actual count for both leads and conversions, the two key elements of the win engine. Another example answer might be leads were lower, but conversion was higher. And you want to hear this, or you want to share this information, because this is an example of you showing that you understand the two parts of the win engine, traffic and conversion, or traffic and leads and conversion, and that you are paying attention to both and you know which part of the engine is working. Am I getting traffic? Am I getting conversion? So when you tell me your leads were lower and your conversion was higher, it lets me know that you know what's going on in the different parts of the win engine. Another answer might be I realized I haven't been counting leads consistently. And the reason why this is a good answer is because you're actually naming it and you're saying, like, I got to work on that. And that could be a whole conversation in and of itself, as long as the next step is for you to really, at some point, either during co-working or in the discussion, get to the bottom of why and fix it so that the next month you will be counting them consistently and you can bring numbers. So it's not always about having things be perfect, but it's about being able to talk about the right things to get you to the next step. So even if you say, I don't have my exact numbers yet, but I'm tracking them in a spreadsheet, then we can look at the spreadsheet. We can see what you got so far. Or we could just, talk about what steps you need to take to finalize getting the numbers all in the spreadsheet. And so this is the work here that you want to do when you're in a discussion, not something as simple as venting about how traffic is slow or how people aren't buying with vague answers and no numbers and no tracking and no desired outcomes. And so once the conversation starts like that, it's very hard to move it forward towards strategy or action. So you want to jump right in and get started with what is the data. The next question is, what traffic source brought in the most relevant activity last month? And I want to pause here because this is the question that I see where things get a little fuzzy sometimes. Because when we talk about traffic, sources and traffic, we're not just naming platforms. We're not just naming everywhere that you are. You're talking about those traffic sources that you're intentionally using, testing, and tracking, not just all the places in which you exist. Because you may have more traffic sources than the ones you're testing and examining and tracking. So when you ask this question, strong answers sound like, well, referrals are my focus for my win initiatives. They brought in fewer people, but they were better fit leads. This tells me you have an intentional source that was in your game plan to test. You understand quality over volume, and you're paying attention to the outcomes. Another example of a response might be, well, for me, email drove the most inquiries this month. And so it tells me that, again, you have a source you're looking at that is tied to a clear call to action, and you have a way to tell when your traffic turns into leads. Sometimes we can talk about going to events or doing a variety of different traffic source things, and the traffic sources aren't really tied to a call to action so that you can tell if they're turning into leads. And so you really want that to be something that comes out in your sharing, that that's not an issue for you. Or that if it is, again, that we name that and we say, hey, how are we getting these traffic sources intentional? How are we getting them tied to specific actions you want your leads to take to move them down the pipeline? Another example of a response might be Instagram brought in traffic for me. That's the traffic source that brought in traffic. However, it didn't really bring in serious leads. And that's also an example of a useful insight, because now we can ask why. Was your call to action clear? Was there a next step? Is there just visibility with no conversion pathway? Um, this is the type of stuff you want to be talking about. All of these answers show that you're tracking, that you're learning, and that you're trying to connect the traffic to something that's measurable. So, um, let's talk about some responses to this question around traffic sources and which traffic sources brought in the most relevance. Some responses. Let's talk about some responses that aren't really as good. If you're hearing things like, "Oh, we're just posting consistently for brand awareness," that's the type of stuff that leads to a lot of posting, a lot of effort, a lot of visual visibility, and no conversions and no sales. Even if brand awareness is the stage you're in now, like, you really want to have an understanding of what awareness should lead to and how you're driving leads down the pipeline. Another thing you might hear is, our email is driving clicks, but we're not sure if it's bringing in leads or not. And so this means you're engaging your email list without any tracking of conversions. And so you want to work on that. And so these types of things, it's okay if the question, it will happen. These sorts of responses will happen, but then your job as a set of besties or as a group that's examining data together is to push each other to say which source was tested and why did you choose that source? What behavior were you expecting people to take that would lead to a sale eventually? What signal were you watching for that you were getting leads in the pipeline? And what was there even a way for traffic to turn into a lead that you could track? Because if not, you got to figure that out. You got to find the source and answer those questions. And having those discussions, you should be taking down notes. Oh, like, okay, so during co-working or when I start my planning time, that's something that I want to work on and get done and come back with for next time. If you can't tell if a traffic source worked, it usually means there's no clear trigger or CTA, and you want to do the work to set it up to be able to measure specific behaviors. All right, so I'm not going to walk you through every single win question in a data lab, but I wanted to give you some examples. Some other things to look at in data meetings for win labs or win bestie meetings is you're looking at your lead flow. Where are your leads getting stuck? You're pressure testing the quality of a lead and talking about the quality of a lead. And so the cool thing about looking at your leads every month and where they come from and how those calls or conversions go or interactions go is you start to learn more about your who's a high value customer, which leads become high value customers. And you want to be tracking that, talking about that, examining that, and getting better and better at knowing who the dope leads are, where they come from. And let's see, what else do I want you to make sure you're doing? Oh, yeah, of course. In your growth game plan, talk about your win initiatives and make sure you're tying it all back to your growth game plan. In your growth game plan, you said you were going to do certain things to get your win rate up, to increase your conversions, to increase traffic. Make sure that when you come to these meetings, that data is associated with the work you're doing in those initiatives. If they're not, then your growth game plan needs to change, or you need to start working on the things in your growth game plan. But they should be working together one way or another. All right. So I just want to, before I wrap up, just kind of give you my intention. I want you to feel empowered to have these conversations with your team, with your business besties in WinLab, and feel like you actually can look at your data. And it's not rocket science in terms of that you get the right few numbers to look at, and then it's all about the conversation. The truth is, the more you have the conversations, the better you get at them. It might feel awkward at first. You might stumble over the numbers, or you might not always know what you're looking at, or you might not always know what to do. But, and this is all normal, but over time, when you keep reviewing and talking through the data and asking better questions, things start to shift and you start to see patterns. You start to get to know your company and your customers more. You stop guessing. You start making really smart adjustments in the business that actually bring in sales. And that's how data stops feeling heavy or intimidating, and it starts feeling like a tool that you know how to use. All right, so keep having those data conversations, keep practicing, keep listening for what your numbers are telling you. If you come to WinLab, we're going to be coaching you through this every month and making sure that you set time aside to break out with each other and co-work and have data conversations. If you prefer to work with your own besties, make sure you grab the Win deck. There's a bestie slide deck for Win meetings in the library. And if you work alone, this is still very useful. And the WinLab worksheet will walk you through a journaling process to have a data discussion with yourself as you look at your data. All right.